This is Research Methods, Unit 4, Part 1 on Validity and Control. Now, when you're talking about an experiment as a whole, there are three types of validity that you need to worry about: internal, construct, and external. Internal validity refers to the extent to which a study provides evidence of a cause or effect relationship between your independent and dependent variables. So, what internal validity is looking at is whether or not there actually is a plausible relationship between what occurred with the independent variable and its influence or effect upon the dependent variable. Going back to our example of ice cream sales and crime rate, that study is one that lacks internal validity because it's not the case that ice cream is causing the increase in the crime rate. It's that there's a third variable that's mediating that relationship. So if you were to make an argument that there is a direct relationship between ice cream sales and crime, that would be a study that would lack internal validity. Now, construct validity is slightly different. It deals with the degree to which your empirical constructs actually measure the theoretical constructs. So, when we talk about the theoretical constructs being a sort of a nebulous concept that doesn't have a concrete aspect to it, so you're interested in aggression on development, well, you need to define what aggression is and what development is. So, aggression could be defined by many various empirical constructs, as could development. And so, what you need to be able to do is define that relationship carefully. And when you don't, the study lacks construct validity. Now, some threats to external validity might be: is it really excessive drinking that leads to memory loss? Or is it something else? Is it the case that people who drink a lot probably don't eat well either? And so, therefore, is it the excessive drinking that causes the memory loss? Or is it the lack of nutrition in general? Or could it be the opposite? Could it be the case that people who have bad memory systems in the first place be more likely to drink? Maybe if you have poor memory, you forget how many drinks you've already had, so therefore you drink more than you should. So those are two examples, perhaps a little bit silly, but worth using, of how a study might lack internal validity. What about some threats to construct validity? Well, in our hypothetical study, is drinking more than 25 drinks per week enough to be considered excessive? Why not 10? Or maybe 100? What criteria are you going to use to define excessive drinking? Or alternatively, is poor performance on a digit span test a good measure of memory loss? Because in reality, it only assesses short term memory. So therefore, you have to question, is it the best measure of your theoretical construct? Now, there's a third kind of validity called external validity, and it has to do with the relationship between the population that you are studying and the actual sample that you use in order to study the phenomenon in question. So, your population could be every person that you aim to describe. So, it could be all people who have ever existed, all drug addicts who have ever existed, or just students in Psych 225. And in reality, of that huge population, your sample is really the subset that you actually study. And for most samples and populations, that little circle that's in the oval there, that represents a pretty sizable sample of the population. For most things that, say, cognitive psychologists are looking about, they're talking about phenomena that they suppose are going on in all people who've ever existed. That's a very large number of people. You can't study them because most of them are dead. And those that are alive, most of them are unavailable because they're so far away, or they speak a different language, or, um, you know, they're just not willing to participate in your study. So external validity really has to do with whether or not your sample is a good representation of your population. So, when you think about it, most research done in psychology tends to be done on 18 to 20-year-olds at Midwestern universities such as the University of Michigan or Ohio State University. Those are two very large universities that have huge psych departments. And the question is, are these students that are in these studies the same as 80-year-old Bushmen living in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana? There's a particular group of people called the San people. And the question is, do the phenomena that we study in 20-year-olds that are in Ann Arbor or in Colombia, are they the same as those that are in Botswana? You have to question whether or not that could be a reasonable argument. There's another threat to validity that's worth mentioning, which is statistical validity. And it refers to the extent that the statistics that you use and the claims that are based upon them are appropriate for the data that you use. Remember when we discussed the different ways of the different kinds of variables that you can have: nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. It is possible to analyze interval data using those methods that are supposed to be developed for analyzing nominal data. So that can be an issue with doing research. But the main question typically has to do with power and effect size, which has to do with the idea that in your study, do you have enough participants or do you have too many? Because both can lead to various problems with the interpretation. However, I don't want to go in depth with this because these are issues that you would deal if you took a statistics course. So I'm not going to mention more about that here, but if you ever take an advanced statistics course, you really would be spending most of the time worrying about issues having to do with statistical validity.